Shalom Esther Giduyuat. It's Tuesday, August 1st. This is Africa 54. We begin in Niger, where the political crisis is deepening. France is preparing to evacuate French and other European nationals from Niger after a military coup there won backing from three other West African nations, Mali, Burkina Faso and Guinea, who are also ruled by the military. Meanwhile, according to a joint statement read out on Malian state television by Kano Abdoulaye Maiga, the military junta in Mali and Burkina Faso warned that any military intervention in Niger to restore deposed President Mohamed Bazoum would be considered a declaration of war against their two countries. The warning from Niger's military-ruled neighbors came a day after West African leaders, supported by their Western partners, threatened to use force to reinstate the democratically elected Bazoum. The junta that seized power in Niger is detaining more senior politicians, defying international calls to restore democratic rule. Chris Degman has more.
More senior politicians in Niger were arrested on Monday as the leaders of a military coup defied international calls to restore democratic rule and reinstate ousted President Mohamed Bazoum. A photo posted by Chad's President Mohamed Idriss Deby, seen on the left, who visited to try to mediate between the coup leaders and the ousted government, appeared to be the first image of Bazoum since the takeover, showing him smiling and apparently unharmed. The coup has sent shockwaves across West Africa, pitting Niger's former Western allies against the likes of Russia and other junta leaders in the region.
There's a lot of speculation at this point.
Annalise Bernard, the director of Strategic Stabilization Advisors, formerly with the State Department in Niger, says there are several theories and rumors for why the coup is happening now, but that military coups are not new to the region.
There's a lot of people talking about how this is Nigerians trying to throw off the yoke of their former colonial ties to France and trying to kick out other Westerners. There's also talk that Russia is behind this. We do not have any evidence that that's the case. What we are seeing, obviously, is that the civilian population, specifically in Niamey, the capital, is very loud right now about anti-French and anti-Western sentiment. There's obviously, we've seen the Russian flags circulating in some of the protests in the streets. But this is also something that we've seen civil society do anytime that there is a protest that takes place in the city, of which there are regular protests in Niamey.
The United States, former colonial power France, and other Western countries have troops in Niger and had been working with the government to fight militant forces linked to Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. And the coup has raised fears for the security of the region.
Niger was our last bulwark of stability in the region, and the country that not just the United States, but a lot of Western partners had invested a lot into. And if Russia does get involved in this one, it undermines, let alone fully dislodges, Western efforts and certainly alliances across the entire Sahel belt. And that is really significant. It was very hard, obviously, when that came true in Mali and seems to be coming true in Burkina Faso as well. But Niger seems like the last, bulwark of stability before we lost all contact with that entire region. And there's a sense, obviously, within Washington that, if Russia is present, it's a very binary relationship. There cannot be a presence of the United States there when Russia's there. I think that relationship becomes quite binary. So I think that's also kind of the big concern, and certainly.
The juntas of neighboring Burkina Faso and Mali voiced their support for the coup on Monday and warned that any military intervention in Niger will be considered a declaration of war against their countries, too. Meanwhile, Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of Russia's Wagner mercenary group, has welcomed the coup in Niger and said his forces were available to restore order. The Kremlin, for its part, said on Monday that the situation in Niger was, quote, cause for serious concern, and called for a swift return to constitutional order. A United States official on Monday said the coup had not been fully successful and that there was still an opportunity to reinstate Bazoum. France and Germany echoed those comments.
That was Chris Degman of Reuters reporting. This week, we are celebrating VOA's English to Africa 60th anniversary and looking back at our programs over the years and their impact on our Africa audience, as well as social media platforms that have a wide appeal to our younger audience. And joining me in the studio is Vincent Bakori, English to Africa Television Managing Editor. Vince, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much,
You
Esther.
host, now I host.
It's nice.
Once in a while.
Yeah.
So now you've hosted numerous shows on VOA English to Africa. From In Focus, Perspective, I can't even mention Straight Talk Africa, many. So, and then you've done a lot of live reports from the continent. What kind of feedback do you get from our audience?
You know, we get very encouraging feedback from our audience throughout all the years of doing television here, over 20 years. One of the things you get to hear from our viewers is that we are the alternative in terms of news source. We give them the kind of information that sometimes they can't get anywhere. They cannot get locally in their countries because of, in some places, restrictions, but other places, the capacity, just a lack of capacity to cover stories in a certain way. So we provide them not only just amazing stories, but in some cases, actually stories that they cannot even handle. Could be issues to do with human rights, democracy, and sometimes issues that are sensitive to particular areas. But there's something else that I found very beautiful about our coverage. You see, we have this advantage of being here covering the entire continent, and especially given that we have the ability to reach many corners of the continent, we bring stories from different parts of the continent and enable viewers in different countries to see things that their local stations are not able to cover. So it's been encouraging just to listen to our viewers.
Mm-hmm. Now, a few years ago, we didn't have digital platforms. We didn't have a lot of social media, anything to post out there. But now we are in the digital age. How are we using this media platform, social media, to reach our younger audience?
This has become a revolutionary because if you notice, you go to any African urban areas, even the rural areas, all young people now get the information through the phone. Everybody has gone digital. And so with that being the reality of the current world in which we live, we have embraced technology. We have embraced social media. So what we are doing is the information that we have on television, the material that we manage to get even on radio, we're able to put that on social media so that the younger generation that are given to consuming through social media can actually get exactly what traditionally would only be found on the traditional television or radio. So it's a revolutionary thing, but we have evolved with it, and we are doing exactly what we need to do at the stage in which we are today.
Now, our programs are carried and aired by several affiliate stations, and people wonder what our affiliate stations may be because they are not in every country in Africa. There are several parts of, Africa where we have affiliate stations broadcasting our radio and television programs. How are we doing? How important is this affiliation?
Affiliate stations are very important to us because they are local stations that partner with us in order for them to air programs that we produce here, in some cases because we may not have, like a channel, or we may not have a kind of a direct signal to beam to the country. So we are able to partner with the local station that take our programs and in turn air those programs locally for the benefit of the millions of viewers across the continent. We've been very successful with this, again, because we provide the affiliate stations with the kind of programming and content that is not only informative, but also helps the journalists actually to sharpen their skills. They get to learn from us, and it's been very, very enriching both ways.
Wish we had more time, Vincent, to talk a little more about our affiliation and so much more from Africa, what they want from us. Thank you very much, Vincent.
It's a pleasure.
Vincent Bakori is the English to Africa's television managing editor. It's day 2 of the U.S.-sponsored Mandela Washington Summit, which is underway right here in Washington, D.C., and over 700 young African leaders are networking with U.S. policy and business leaders. For more on the summit, I'm joined live via Skype by VOA's Mike Hovey, who is attending the event. Hello, Mike.
Hi, Esther. How you doing?
Good. Now, tell us what's new on the second day of the 2023 Mandela Washington Summit.
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of proceedings that happened today. As you can hear behind me, the Mandela Washington Fellows just got out of another session. But throughout the whole morning, there's been a lot of action going on. Networking continuing between U.S. authorities and, of course, the Mandela Washington Fellows. Today, we got to see a couple of high-level officials, among them Samantha Powell from USAID and Molly P., who is the Assistant Deputy Secretary under the State Department.
And what was the focus of the discussion today?
Well, several things were touched on today. However, it seemed one point was highlighted throughout the whole discussion, and that is the saying that seems to be coming up every year with Yali. African youth have the answer to Africa's problems. One of the points that were highlighted today is the discussions that were tackled is the discussion around food insecurity. Now, both Samantha Powell and Molly P. were questioning how Africa is facing food insecurity while highlighting the fact that African youth have the adequate tools to tackle that problem.
And Mike, if you can share with us, what did the U.S. authorities there talk about? Any of the programs, did they address the programs of strengthening, encouraging, and empowering the youth of Africa that are in the Mandela Fellowship?
Right. That was one of the things that they highlighted, is that Washington is determined to strengthen its ties with African youth, which is the whole point of the Young African Leaders Initiative or the Mandela Washington Fellowship. Now, one thing they did highlight is how U.S. authorities or how the Mandela Washington Fellowship is strengthening its ties with African youth through investment, through mentorship, through skills provision. They talked about the grants and the investment opportunities and, of course, the loans that the State Department has specifically for African youth.
Mike, we still have one more day to go. What are we looking forward to tomorrow?
Now, one thing that everybody's looking forward to is, of course, Wednesday's closing session. That is where you're going to witness Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He's going to be addressing the Mandela Washington Fellows. Now, unfortunately, the 3-day summit wraps up tomorrow. However, young African leaders will get to speak to Secretary of State Antony Blinken. They'll get to, of course, highlight more of the initiatives that the fellowship has. And, of course, that's where they're going to be unveiling who and who did not get any grants, who and who will be leaving Washington with some money.
Well, good luck to all of them. We'll see who gets a lot of money and what they're going to take back to the continent. Mike, thank you very much for your reporting. VOA's Mike Hovey reporting live for us from the Yali Summit in Washington. Still to come, health correspondent Lino Mudu joins us with today's health report. Stay with us.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, we'll examine the latest political developments in Niger and how that might influence stability in the Sahel. Also, VOA's English to Africa service celebrates 60 years of programming to the continent. Join me, Vincent McCory, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
In other news, leading Senegalese opposition figure Ousmane Sonko is being detained and charged with fomenting insurrection, stoking concerns about a further unrest 2 months after fatal clashes. Sonko, a presidential candidate and President Macky Sall's fiercest critic, is facing a string of legal woes which he claims have been designed to keep him out of politics. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is welcoming Kenya's offer to positively consider leading a multinational police force to help combat Haiti's gangs and improve security in the violence-racked Caribbean nation. Haitian Prime Minister Ariel Henry requested last October for the deployment of a specialized armed force to halt the gangs. And Nigerian President Bola Tinubu is reiterating economic measures to ease growing hardships as labor unions threatened protests to demand more action. The government ended decades-long gasoline subsidies that Tinubu says favored the rich, but the decision has more than doubled the price of gas, causing a sharp spike in prices of food and other essential commodities. Environmental and climate activists across Nigeria are joining forces with others worldwide in the fight to combat climate change. Gibson Emeka has this story from Abuja, narrated by Salem Solomon.
And we have less than 5 years to act. So it's actually a reminder, it's actually a call, it's actually a wake-up, it's actually a need for urgent action.
Sakina Bello, a leading environmental activist, is doing her part to ensure that world temperatures don't rise above an average of 1.5 degrees Celsius. A 2018 report from the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change predicts that this could happen as early as 2030 and drastically change the global climate system. Bello is urging Nigerians to get involved in the fight to save their country and the world from climate extremes.
So it actually started from the community, from the grassroots, and from the home, and that's how the passion started. Community needs to be informed about the effect of their attitude, and they should be called for attitudinal change, because if we don't change our attitude, then we're coming back to zero.
Nigeria has seen extreme weather events linked to climate change, including the flooding of Bello's hometown. According to the Nigerian National Emergency Agency, flooding in 2022 displaced around 2.5 million people, affected over 800,000 hectares of farmland, and caused an estimated $9.12 billion in economic losses. Joseph Ibrahim is the West African coordinator of Climate Clock, a project that sets up clocks that show how much time is left to prevent the global temperature from rising above 1.5 degrees Celsius, the scientific point of no return. He says climate change has caused food insecurity.
We are having increasing floods in our communities, and then we are having longer drought in the north. Sahara Desert is encroaching our land very fast, and so we are losing productive land to the desert.
Aliyu Yauri, an official from the Nigerian Ministry of Environment, says the country has and will continue to scale up efforts to combat the climate crisis.
Recently, the National Council on Climate Change has been established just to ensure that climate change issue is given a priority in the national development programs in Nigeria.
Environmental advocate Michael David says the Nigerian government needs to go beyond policy and into implementation.
The implementation is where the issues are. And again, a lot of this happen only at the federal level. At the state, nothing is being done.
Effecting change takes money, and lack of financing has slowed national efforts, but Bello says she will keep trying, person by person, to stop rising temperatures. For Gibson Emeka, in Abuja, Nigeria, Salem Solomon, VOA News.
And it's time now for a health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Esther. Hello, everyone. Each year, countries worldwide celebrate World Breastfeeding Week from August 1st to August 7th. The global campaign aims to raise awareness about breastfeeding and its advantages. The World Health Organization recommends breastfeeding a child until the age of 2. This year's campaign supports breastfeeding working mothers with the theme, "Let's make breastfeeding and work work." The WHO says more than 500 million working women are not given essential maternity protections in national laws. A study published in the British medical journal Global Health found that Africa has less than 2 health workers per 1,000 people. The World Health Organization recommends at least 4 health workers per 1,000 people to deliver essential health services and achieve universal health coverage. Observers say medical brain drain is partly to blame, as some health workers travel abroad to seek better employment opportunities. The shortage of qualified medical personnel affects access to care, the quality of care people receive, the productivity and survival rates of diseases on the continent. For more insight, joining us now via live Skype from Nairobi, Kenya, is Dr. Theophilus Wangata with Precise Healthcare in Tanzania. He is a general practitioner. Dr. Wangata, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Leonard. It's Nairobi.
Thank you for joining us from Nairobi. Brain drain has been identified as a serious impediment to the healthcare system in Africa. What is the scope of the problem and the direct impact on health systems?
Thank you. The scope is very serious because we have doctors trained, and after training, they go to a foreign country. Mostly they travel to the US, or Australia, the UK, and parts of Europe. This is serious because it takes a lot of years, like 5 or 6 years, to train a doctor. And especially in fields that are not well advanced in Africa, we have like plastic surgery and cosmetic surgery, advanced fields like organ transplants or stem cell transplants. We have doctors who leave because they are looking for greener pastures, and this is not good. It also creates a perception that it is better healthcare out there, and patients also travel abroad for similar treatments.
So, Dr. Wangata, what will it take for African countries to retain more of their workers? What are some of the solutions?
So some of the solutions are more education opportunities, more capacity in terms of universities, more capacities in terms of training of doctors locally, both undergraduate and postgraduate in different countries of Africa, and also increasing the local capacity in the hospitals to cater for diseases and to treat patients, because doctors are trained based on the capacity of the local environment in the hospitals. So the hospitals need to have that capacity. But more importantly, increase the healthcare spending. The GDP of most African countries is below 10%, compared to, say, the US, that is at least 17% towards healthcare as the overall GDP, or most of the European nations. So government should increase healthcare spending.
And before we wrap, government have a responsibility. Do you think that the healthcare workers have a responsibility as well to serve the country?
Yes, the healthcare workers as well, besides just going for greener pastures because there are more salaries or hefty tax or allowances, should also learn to do something for their community and be innovative. Like I myself have come up with innovative ways of treating patients in the comfort of their homes, and I don't have to go abroad to come up with solutions for local grown problems.
Okay, Dr. Wangata, we have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Theophilus Wangata is with Precise Healthcare in Kenya, Nairobi. He was joining us. That's our health report for today. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter at Mudu. Thank you. Esther, back to you.
Thank you so much, Lino. And we're going to go quickly to VOA's English to Africa service celebration of 60 years anniversary. We reached out to some of our former colleagues who have now retired. Today we hear from Bill Wilkinger and Roblin Himes.
My name is Bill Workinger. I joined English to Africa in 1987 and retired in 2020. I was lucky, very lucky, to have official duties in a variety of areas during those years. Duties such as radio production and studio direction. I was able to host and prepare a number of scripts for a variety of shows in English to Africa during the period, including African Panorama, Nightline Africa, also Africa World Tonight, and one of our current flagship broadcasts, which is still in place, Africa News Tonight. And for a number of years, I also sprinkled in a bit of photojournalism, able to cover a number of events in the Washington, D.C. area for the agency and English to Africa. From my perspective, English to Africa was clearly one of the best offices to work in at the Voice of America, with some of the best service chiefs in the building. Happy birthday, and a very happy 60th anniversary to English to Africa.
Happy 60th anniversary, English to Africa. What a great time to celebrate the many programs you produce over the years. I spent the last few years of my VOA career prior to retirement in English to Africa after working nearly 40 years within the agency. It was an educational time to learn about Africa and to meet and obtain long friendships with colleagues as well. English to Africa produced outstanding programs and showcasing the world to Africans in creative ways. I'm sure English to Africa will continue to deliver informative information to Africa and to all. Keep up with the outstanding work, English to Africa. Congrats. And now I got to run off to my morning tennis session. Living the life in retirement. Take care, all. I'm Robin Himes.
Thanks, and that's our show for today. We'll join you again tomorrow, so be sure to tune in. Thank you for watching.
In fact, some Yemenis are suffering from continued and even increased restrictions on the flow of goods, including Houthi impediments to the sale of cooking gas and to the movement of other goods from southern Yemen to the north. The Houthis also continue to block oil exports, further exacerbating the Yemen's humanitarian and economic crisis. We must continue to do everything in our power to end this war and the violence that has plagued Yemen for the last 8 years. And we must do this with urgency.